All right, fifth grade. Today for science, we're going to be on chapter 1, lesson 4, so you should have out 2 sheets. You can have out your worksheet. You can also then have out your notes, and you're going to be on page 22 through 25. At the end of this video, I am going to show you what these completed notes should look like because I've had a lot of questions, so we'll help you out with the notes, and I'll walk you through this worksheet to make sure that we are doing those correctly. Once you have both those things out and you're opened up to page 22, you can go ahead and hit play and we'll get started. Alright, fifth grade, so we have been looking at how vertebrates and invertebrates were classified. Today we're going to look at how other organisms are classified, so if they're not invertebrates or vertebrates. We're going to see mostly plants as we read through, and we're going to start reading in the section called Qualities of Plants. Plants differ from animals in a special way. They use sunlight, water, and carbon dioxide to make their own sugar for food. They may have other distinctive features such as stems, roots, and leaves. Many are vascular. This means the plant has special tubes for carrying food and water to all its parts. Organisms in the plant kingdom are multicellular, just like animals, which means they're made up of more than one cell. 4 common plant phyla are shown on these pages, which is what we're going to read through. So on your notes, remember for qualities of plants, just the first note is plants use blank, water, and blank to make food. I see in the first section it says plants use sunlight, water, and carbon dioxide to make food. And just like animals, plants are multicellular. The one difference that we see is that plants are able to feed themselves, whereas animals are not. Reading on to mosses. Mosses. You have probably seen moss growing on trees or in a shallow stream. A single moss plant is very small and has very tiny leaf-like structures. Mosses have no flowers or seeds. So if you've seen moss before, it looks like there's a picture on the bottom of page 22, but it looks just like grass, but it's usually in kind of random spots. Reading on about ferns. Most ferns have feather-like leaves. Look at the picture of the young folded fern leaves at the right. At this stage, these leaves are called fiddleheads. One way ferns are different from mosses is that ferns are vascular. Vascular plants can grow larger than non-vascular plants. This is because the vascular tubes can carry materials to parts of the plant high off the ground. Ferns and mosses are alike in that they both use spores to reproduce. So I wrote this on your page, but there's 2 things that you should write down. I wrote down mosses are non-vascular. You could also write down that they have no flowers or seeds. Ferns have feather-like leaves, and they're also vascular. But they both use spores to reproduce, which are just little tiny seeds that kind of shoot out and land in the ground and will reproduce. Going on to conifers. The conifer phylum includes pines, firs, and spruce. It'd be wrong to say that these trees do not have leaves. The needles of many conifers are special leaves. A conifer is a vascular plant that reproduces using cones and seeds. So we've got a lot of pine trees up here in Wisconsin, and so you've seen those those leaves that are needles. They're vascular, and when you've got a pine cone, that's actually how the pine tree then reproduces, is those cones and seeds in there go into the ground and create a new tree. Flowering plants. This is certainly the most colorful phylum of plants. About 230,000 species of flowering plants have been identified. All flowering plants are vascular. These plants use their flowers to make seeds for reproduction. Mosses, ferns, and conifers don't produce flowers. So that's just a little bit different, is that they have flowers. So we see those all around us, where we get to see it's a little bit more colorful and a little bit more beautiful as far as what flowering plants look like. All right, and then we jump to page 24, where it's talking about if it's neither a plant nor an animal. Over the years, many new organisms have been discovered. Some of these do not fit well in either the plant or animal kingdom. For example, some organisms can move on their own, like animals, but they perform photosynthesis like plants. Many of these organisms are made of only one cell and can be seen with a microscope. Some organisms are collections of single cells that could live alone but benefit by working together in colonies. Some of the microscopic organisms cause disease. Many, though, are harmless. Some are even helpful. So there's nothing you need to write down in that section for your notes. Going on to the next section, 4 more kingdoms. Organisms that are not classified as plants or animals can be classified as fungi, protists, eubacteria, and archaebacteria. These kingdoms are described on page 25. These organisms have the same needs as all living things. So they all need an environment for food, water, and waste removal. Many need carbon dioxide or oxygen like plants or animals. So on the bottom page, it talks about the bottom of your notes. It says kingdoms are constantly changing, but there are currently blank kingdoms to classify. So on this page, we see that there's 4 more kingdoms on top of plants and animals. So in total, there are 6 kingdoms to classify organisms. At various times, biologists have changed the numbers of kingdoms to better fit the organisms they have found in places like hot springs. Not all biologists agree on how to make these changes. Even when biologists agree on the number of kingdoms, there can be debates on how to classify a newly discovered organism. This is because a newly discovered organism may be very much like 2 groups of organisms. Biologists may disagree as to which group the new organism should be placed in. These debates are sometimes confusing. One thing is for sure: as long as new information is found, the classification system will keep changing. So again, we keep hearing that this system is always changing. On the very next page, it just talks about the fungi kingdom, and that's just talking about mushrooms. It's the one that is the very most common. So I want you to look at page 25. I wrote down that fungi are not plants because they cannot make their own food. And then if you just want to write down one more thing that you find on page 25 to write. Alright, so just to go through this, I just want you to see what this looks like on your notes. So as you listen to the video, you should have been filling this out, but if you still have questions, I just want you to see. So I kind of started filling it out for you. So then as you're writing 2 things down, this isn't anything crossing out. That's actually a line that you should be filling in. So mosses are non-vascular. I also remember that mosses use spores to reproduce. So just make sure that you are using those lines, and you should be filling this out as you're listening to the video so that there shouldn't be any questions on there. So once you're done, that this should all be complete. I did want to walk through just the worksheet that you have for today. So I'm okay with if you circle it. So plants use sunlight, water, and I just filled that out on my notes. So I can look back, plants use sunlight, water, and this says and carbon dioxide. So I know you can circle it, but then I also want you to write it over here. Members of the plant kingdom are singular-celled or multicellular. Just right on here it even says, just like animals, plants are. I know they're multicellular. I misspelled that, but I know that it's right here, multicellular. Alright, so continuing on then, it says ferns and moss reproduce by seeds or spores. I see two times in my notes that mosses use spores and ferns use spores to reproduce. So I know the answer is spores. So make sure that you are always going through your notes to help you out with your worksheet, because so often these are going to help you fill out this worksheet. So for number 9 is one that I want to help you out with. It says a garden contains 20% or 20 different species of plants. 5 of those plants are ferns. What percent of the garden is made up of ferns? So I know that 5 out of the 20 are made up of ferns. So this is the ferns and this is our total. And then I need to reduce that. So I'd reduce that by dividing each of those by 5 and getting 1/4. But I know that it asked me for a percent, and I know that 1/4 is 25%. Make sure that you show your work